It is 8:27 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the 26th day of May, 2026, and this is episode, 1328, I believe? Yeah, 1328 of Bitcoin. And I got a couple of things that I want to get through today, but one of the main parts of today's episode is going to be a read of Kudzai's article entitled "Society of Virtue Signalers." Good Lord, it's a Tuesday, all right. Good Lord. It really, the article itself caught my attention simply because he says this thing at the, towards the end, and it says, "Build the cathedral." And if you've been listening to this show, you know that Cathedral Project is very near and dear to my heart. So he was speaking my language. Now, he wasn't talking about the cathedral thought experiment that I'm working on. However, this is sort of a trend. A lot of Bitcoiners have been thinking for quite a while about how do we really think about what's going on here, and how do we start thinking very much long term. And when I mean long term, I mean past your eventual death. What can you do today that either builds something or fashions a thought that will survive you after you're dead? And so that part really caught my attention. So I want to read the whole article for you. But first, we are going to do a little bit of news, and then we're going to do some other news in the back half of the show. So it is the Bitcoin and Podcast with me, your host, David Bennett, bringing you all the news that you can use about Bitcoin and macro from around the world. And there's quite a bit of shit going on today. We're going to start in New York. New York lawsuit tests lost property claim over dormant Bitcoin. Oh boy, this is going to be a doozy. Zoltan Vardai begins us off today with Cointelegraph. A New York lawsuit filed by Noah Doe and two Wyoming-based LLCs, ABC Company and XYZ Company, seeks a court order declaring ownership of 39,000 dormant Bitcoin addresses. Not Bitcoin itself, but they're saying Bitcoin addresses. And this is raising important questions about the legal treatment of inactive Bitcoin under property law. Filed on May the 1st, the suit claims that the coins tied to the listed addresses represent legally abandoned property they found and reported to the New York Police Department and claimed under New York lost property law. The plaintiffs claim that the dormant Bitcoin wallets were legally abandoned property that they found, including wallets belonging to early Bitcoin miners and addresses attributed to Bitcoin creator Satoshi Nakamoto, among other lost coins and unidentified entities. They claim that these constitute seizable property akin to traditional bank accounts. The lawsuit raises important questions about the legal treatment of long-dormant Bitcoin wallets, including Satoshi-era tokens that have been inactive for over a decade. While the legal basis of the lawsuit is questionable at best, it is unclear how the plaintiff could recover the lost Bitcoin without possessing the private keys to access the wallets. However, even if the court ruled in favor of the plaintiff, it would only be a symbolic move that is not technically enforceable, as the Bitcoin network has no mechanism to, quote, reassign funds without a private key. Nova lead research analyst at investment firm Castle Labs, told Cointelegraph, quote, "The one narrow exception would be if any of these coins are moved to a regulated custodian or exchange, at which point a court could then compel that intermediary to act," end quote. The research analyst argued that a significant portion of these coins may belong to deceased holders, those who lost their keys, or simply to long-term holders who haven't transacted, meaning that none of these instances constitute legal abandonment. The 901-page lawsuit, 901-page lawsuit lists 39,069 total Bitcoin wallet addresses, including wallet address 12C6D, which is associated with Satoshi Nakamoto, and of course, the all-famous address 1FEX, which is linked to the Mt. Gox exchange hacker. ABC and XYZ companies Noah Doe and the lawsuit against John Doe holding 39,069 BTC Bitcoin wallets. It's basically the title of this. Oh, good Lord, of this screenshot. Now, so it's a 901-page lawsuit, and in that lawsuit, they list literally every single full address of 39,069 Bitcoin wallet addresses, which is probably why it's 901 pages long. But anyway, the listed addresses hold, an estimated 3.7 million Bitcoin, valued at about $285 billion, according to Sani, the founder of Bitcoin on-chain analytics platform TimeChain Index. The founder also noted that most of the old Satoshi era tokens are currently sitting in pay-to-public key output formats, while the plaintiffs only sent legal notices to the corresponding hashed public key under pay-to-public key hash formats, which often hold no value at all. This could undermine the claim that proper notice of abandonment was given to the holder, since plaintiffs sent the legal notices to empty P2PKH addresses, while the actual Bitcoin balance sits in unnotified P2PK scripts. Oh, shit. So they sent the notice to the wrong addresses. And the fact that they sent a notice to all these things, it's just, I'll get to why I think this is an attack later and not it's not really an above board lawsuit. I think this is a trial balloon for an attack on Bitcoin. Anyway, Castle Labs lead research analyst agreed, adding that the messaging attempt was structurally defective because it was sent to the address formats no longer used by the targeted wallets. Sending a small transaction via the op return function would be similarly ineffective, as it only works with active recipients monitoring their wallets. The over 39,000 wallets named in the lawsuit hold Bitcoin that are considered dormant or lost, meaning that they haven't been circulating on-chain for multiple years. There are currently 3.5 million Bitcoin worth about $271 billion that have been dormant for the past 10 years, and another 6.6 million coin worth around 5.77 billion that have been dormant for over 5 years. Okay, so that's the end of the article. So what's happened here is that these guys, these plaintiffs, Noah Doe and ABC Company and XYZ Company, which I don't know, that just sounds suspect automatically. I mean, Noah Doe. Does John Doe ring any bells? Something about this entire thing just smells fake and gay. But they've discovered all these wallets, I guess crawling it with AI or something like that, figured out which ones haven't transacted in 10 years or more, and then had those listed out. And then they sent these notices to these wallets, but many of these notices actually didn't go to what would be considered an active wallet. These would be like a completely different kind of address, which is really not being used anymore. So it makes me wonder how many Satoshis they spent sending messages to these wallets saying, hey, we're going to take your shit if you don't do something, and have them never be received. But the real question here is, again, how would you be able to get the Bitcoin from these wallet addresses? Now, the notion that if somebody activated those wallets, in other words, sent some of the Bitcoin from those wallets to an exchange, and then all of a sudden the exchange is told by the courts, hey, this is an abandoned wallet, You gotta give it to John Doe or Noah Doe and these two Wyoming based LLCs. But then at that point, the wallet's not dormant. So it kind of breaks the entire notion of the lawsuit in the first place. So I don't think this has anything at all to do with trying to actually get this Bitcoin. I think it's FUD. I think it's fear, uncertainty, and doubt trying to be injected into the system from a legal front to make people very much worried that at any given time, maybe their wallet could be declared abandoned property and then they lose their Bitcoin. But of course, that can't happen. Here, that's the thing with Bitcoin. This is what we keep trying to tell people. If you hold your private keys and all of the Bitcoin that you own are held under those private keys, nobody but you has access to that Bitcoin. Nobody can move it. Nobody can spend it. Nobody can take it. Nobody can do anything with it. The only person that can do that is the holder of the private key that holds that Bitcoin. That's it. These jamokes can file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, and it is not going to matter. They cannot touch the Bitcoin. And even if your wallet was listed, and for whatever reason you sent, like, I don't know, you got 100 Bitcoin, you send one Bitcoin over to CoinDesk or whatever, and then CoinDesk gets some kind of cease and desist order where they say, hey, you gotta abscond with this dude's Bitcoin because it's an abandoned wallet. Dude, you will be able to file a lawsuit against not only Coinbase, but whoever it was that asked the court to make that request to Coinbase. Because it's like, at that point, it's attempted theft. This entire thing is beyond ridiculous. And it's, in my opinion, just another way to inject FUD into the system. But let's move on. Someone just broadcasted 5 Bitcoin transactions totaling 107 Bitcoin to a Bitcoin burn address. Let that sink in. Somebody over the course of not 1, not 2, not 3, but 5 separate transactions sent 107 Bitcoin to a place they will never be able to retrieve it from. That's what a burn address is for Bitcoin. A burn address is a valid Bitcoin address that has no private keys. Don't ask me how the hell these things are created. To me, they are the scariest damn things I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't want to know how they're spun up without a private key. But that's the thing. So here's what happened. And we don't know exactly why this occurred. We know how it occurred. We know somebody actually got with a wallet and told that wallet, and they had their private keys to send Bitcoin with that wallet, said send 5 transactions totaling 107 Bitcoin to this address, from which these 107 Bitcoin will never be retrievable. Do the math on how much it actually cost, how much millions of dollars this was. If we don't know why, we don't know if this was done on purpose. We don't know if it was an accident. We don't really know anything other than that somebody, sometime either last night or early this morning, permanently burned 107 Bitcoin. If this was a mistake, if this was somebody was told, hey, here's an address, send me your Bitcoin, and I don't know, you'll get 12% yield. I don't know what the hell happened here, right? But let's say it was that. Then this person goes, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then all of a sudden, nobody gets the Bitcoin. So a lot of anything that I can conjecture kind of doesn't make sense. Like Grok suggested that it may have been a copy-paste error, But that begs the question, why the hell would you have ever copied a Bitcoin burn address? Don't ever do that. Don't play around with these things. Don't find them. Don't ever copy them. Don't do anything with a Bitcoin burn address. Because if it was a copy paste error, like for some reason he's in his wallet and I don't know, maybe he had access in his wallet to a Bitcoin burn address because I don't know, maybe he sent like a little bit of Bitcoin to this address just to see if it was truly unrecoverable and a bad mistake was made. But dude, 107 Bitcoin is gone. So please, for the love of God, be careful. Don't play around with Bitcoin burn addresses. That is for somebody else to be jacking around with, not you. And then there's strategy. Okay, so strategy is back in the news. Now, this has been going on all weekend long. There's been conjecture. Nobody knows. Well, nobody knew exactly what the hell was going on, but we do have some clarity from James Van Straten out of CoinDesk. Strategy taps their cash reserve to retire that $1.5 billion in convertible debt. And you remember, I was talking about this last week. Saylor came out swinging, saying something about he was going to possibly sell Bitcoin. It was on the table to sell Bitcoin because he wanted to do this, get rid of this $1.5 billion in debt and blah, blah, blah. And everybody was like, oh, he's going to sell some Bitcoin. Well, it turns out, as far as CoinDesk is concerned, that he used all cash and actually did not sell any Bitcoin. Let's find out more. Strategy, the world's largest holder of Bitcoin, repurchased $1.5 billion of its 0% convertible senior notes due 2029 last week for $1.38 billion, opting to reduce debt rather than add to its Bitcoin treasury. The company funded the repurchase using cash reserves, and that has brought those reserves down to about $871 million following the debt repurchase and related capital transactions. Executive Chairman Saylor referenced the move on Sunday in a post on X, writing, quote, "This week we bought bonds, not Bitcoin. The BitVac is charging," end quote. The repurchase marks a shift from the company's usual Bitcoin accumulation strategy as it looks to restructure liabilities tied to its Bitcoin treasury model. Upon settlement, the purchase reduced the company's outstanding debt obligations to $6.7 billion. That's down from $8.2 billion. MSTR shares rose almost 2% in pre-market trading alongside Bitcoin's modest rise back to the $77,000 mark over the weekend. Okay, so as far as we know, Strategy did not sell any Bitcoin. And Strategy did, to fund this particular transaction, also did not use, I guess, because they said cash reserves. So I'm also assuming here that they did not sell any Stretch or Strife or Strike or any of the other preferred perpetual things that they got going on. So it begs the question, why would Saylor, if he knew he was going to use cash, if Saylor knew that he had $1.38 billion in simple cash reserves to do this transaction, and he ultimately did use all of that cash to do this transaction, then why would he have put it into the wind all last week that he may sell Bitcoin? Why was he ginning up the FUD machine? To what possible end might Saylor have done this? Because it seems to me that here's the way that I think what I think is going on here. Saylor knew he had $1.38 billion in cash to do this. He knew he was going to do this with all cash. He said multiple times, either on X or in interviews on widely watched economic and financial news programming, that he might sell Bitcoin to do this transaction. Why? That's my question. And I have zero answers. If you have an answer, if you have a theory, shit, man, I want to hear it. And you can do that through any Podcasting 2.0 app, podcast app, because you can boost me and you can send me a message along with that boost. I don't care if it's just 100 sats. I want to know your thoughts. I really do. I want to know your thoughts as to why you think, if Saylor knew he had all cash to do it, and he knew he was going to do it with all cash and nothing else, then why the fuck does he talk about selling Bitcoin to do this transaction? Because I don't have an answer for you. And it makes me feel dirty, which is why I'm glad that I've got Soap Miner as one of my Circle P vendors. The Circle P is open for business. It's where I bring vendors and plebs with goods and services to you, other plebs who may want to buy said goods and services, but you will be buying into Bitcoin, because if you're not selling into Bitcoin, you're not in the Circle P. Handmade tallow soap from my good buddy at Soap Miner at soapminer.com. Go to soapminer.com, hit the shop, and buy cedarwood tallow 5-ounce bars for $8, except you will be buying it in Bitcoin, because he takes Bitcoin. Because if you don't take Bitcoin, you're not in the Circle P. But cedarwood happens to be my favorite one of the soaps that he makes. But he also makes pine tar tallow, which my family is on right now, and it's a lovely soap. He's got lemongrass and orange clove tallow. He's got lavender tallow. He's got goat's milk tallow, tea tree, peppermint, rough cut, Earl Grey, which is actually, up until I tried the cedar soap, the Earl Grey tallow soap was my favorite. And his base soap, like, is a rough cut tallow soap. And the ingredients are 100% pure grass-fed beef tallow, sodium hydroxide, and distilled water. If you're scared about sodium hydroxide, dude, it's just lie. We've been making soap like this for hundreds of years. It's just, you get fat, you get lye, you get water, you cook it all up, you got soap. And that's what Soap Miner does. And it's like the best soap. But then he starts adding oil, essence or oils, essences of stuff like Earl of Bergamot for his Earl Grey tallow soap. And sometimes he colors it, and there's like different kinds of sands that he uses to color it. He's got a carbon based one, which is nothing. It's got like a whole bunch of charcoal in it. And that's great for getting oil and crap off of your hands. It's also a great deodorant bar, because carbon just loves to eat any kind of organic chemistry, and that would include body odor as well. Go to soapminer.com. That's soapminer.com. Use code BitcoinAnd, because you will get 10% off of your total purchase. Use BitcoinAnd as the coupon code at soapminer.com. That's soapminer.com. Use the code BitcoinAnd. All right, so let's get to this article by Kudzai. That's Kudzai. And the name of the article is Society of Virtue Signalers. This article is more about modern culture being fake and gay and performative. It's about fiat money being framed as the root of the counterfeit engine. It also talks about Bitcoin, but not as sheer salvation. I think this is a really good take on some of the things that we've been seeing. So let's get into it. Kudzai, Society of Virtue Signalers. The age of the avatar. We are living in perilous but exciting times. Life today has now become a composite of experiences captured in images and videos that fit neatly on a social media reel. Everything is perfect, every smile is perfect, every moment unforgettable, and everyone is happy as they live their best life. Where's the peril in all this, you may ask? This seems like a purely blissful existence, does it not? Well, hardly so, because it's all fake. Welcome to the Society of Virtue Signalers, a civilization where to most people the truth doesn't matter, beauty is desecrated, and goodness is destroyed. Instead of the concern shifting to how many clicks something can generate or how good it will look on the gram, as that will ensure a quick path to monetization of the wall, or rather of the well curated illusions. Ours is no longer an age of authenticity, but the age where instead of living life to the full, it has been turned into a performance for the applause by a faceless audience. In this virtue signal driven society, a place drowning in shallowness and fakeness, where most people are just actors selling an avatar assembled from borrowed opinions, filtered photographs, synthetic outrage, and algorithmically optimized compassion, men don't wake up with strong convictions or beliefs about anything, but are more driven by parroting opinions that will preserve their employability. Comfortable and safe opinions that don't rock the boat, thus changing nothing. Where men of old arose to conquer the mighty oceans and sail to distant lands, the virtue signalers of today prefer sipping their almond milk lattes in their blue-lit cubicles while endlessly doom-scrolling, gently drifting into a life of nothingness. When altruism becomes a costume. As if that's not enough, even altruism and activism have become nothing but a court jester's costume. So-called climate activists that endlessly lecture us about carbon footprint shamelessly fly their private jets from one climate conference to the next. Then we have social justice warriors that scream equality while embezzling donor funds for the purpose of financing their lavish lifestyles, and not forgetting the billionaires that advise the people to get it vaccinated while simultaneously being big-time investors in the pharmaceutical companies manufacturing the very vaccines they peddle. The masses find all this nonsense to be fascinating and gladly do as they are told without questioning the apparent contradiction. After all, these are their infallible idols and experts talking, and the incongruency between their words and actions just don't matter. Why should it? No one is perfect, right? The counterfeiting engine. Beneath this digital hallucination sits the greatest counterfeit engine of the modern world: fiat money. Money detached from reality that is borrowed into existence. A piece of green cotton, or worse, a number on a server farm in Virginia that the virtue signaling society has agreed to pretend is solid. Value conjured from nothing by bureaucrats in marble buildings who speak in euphemisms, while quietly stealing the lifeblood of entire generations. They print, you toil. They inflate, you decay. They borrow, you get taxed. The modern economy is a casino where the currency itself is rigged, yet people still worship it. They sacrifice marriages for it, trade their health for it, and then spend it trying to recover their health and their relationships for it, in the vain hope that the appearance of success will earn the respect of people that they don't particularly like. They crawl through traffic before sunrise to labor in the concrete jungle plantations where they sell their precious time in exchange for a promissory note created from central bank-inspired hocus pocus and backed by nothing but the promise of men who have broken every promise. And what happens when they finally acquire this mythical treasure? When the ambitious virtue signaler reaches the summit of fiat success? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the silence is worse than the hunger. The struggle gave you a reason to wake up, and the climb gave you an identity. Once you own the mountain, once the fiat has purchased all the distractions it can buy, you look in the mirror and see a ghost with a good credit score. 40 years of your life gone and spent climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. You are rich and you are worthless. You are free and you have nowhere to go. The money did not buy the meaning. You suddenly discover that you are the same person in a nicer room with better wine, drowning in the same questions, only now with fewer excuses to avoid them. That is the curse of fake wealth. It doesn't buy happiness, it buys the absence of poverty. And absence is not a life, it's just a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. So you fill it with more stuff, more passive consumption, but to no avail because men cannot survive on consumption alone. A creature built for meaning cannot be satisfied by accumulation. A civilization medicating itself. Despite all the false glitz and glamour, the virtue signaler is a haunted creature, as there is nothing that corrodes the soul faster than a fake and pretentious life. A faker surrounded by fakers, an army of mannequins complementing each other's masks. Their unique identity totally swallowed and dissolved. Basically, a lighthouse in a bathtub that shines so brightly, but illuminating absolutely nothing. The story gets worse when they look at the others like them. They see their flawless grief, their calculated spontaneity, their sponsored vulnerability, and they quickly realize that they too are looking at them with the exact same hollow dread. A hall of mirrors reflecting nothing but the absence of light, a confidence of terrified egos all drowning in the same shallow pool, each one convinced the others know how to swim. Such is the community of virtue signalers, where men of old built magnificent cathedrals, explored the stars, composed symphonies, and built monuments that have lasted for centuries. The virtue signaler today quietly refreshes their analytics dashboard every 5 minutes, hoping against hope that enough strangers online validate his breakfast photograph. Is this what we dare call progress? Everywhere you go, it's all endless dopamine hits, infinite entertainment as a sedative for this painful existence, infinite consumption to satiate their vices, and infinite distraction to numb the pain of confusion and meaninglessness. A civilization desperately medicating itself against the horror of its own spiritual emptiness. People no longer live lives. Instead, they consume them. Scroll down, swipe right, swipe left, click, 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 order, play, play again, binge, repeat. Consumption is the opiate of the masses. We don't need bread and circuses anymore. We have content, an endless, beige, algorithmic slurry of hot takes, rebooted franchises, and true crime documentaries that turn the agony of real women into your Tuesday evening entertainment. Jesus Christ. You watch a series about a serial killer, then you scroll past a genocide. Then you buy a candle that smells like a library, all within 60 seconds, all with the same fiat, dead-eyed clicking. You have perfected the art of feeling without acting. It is necrophilia for emotions. You cuddle the corpse of empathy so you don't have to breathe life into it. Thoughts and prayers, the two most cowardly words in the English language, a spell you cast to ward off the terrifying responsibility of doing something hard. What tool did you use to build this exquisite mausoleum of the self? Technology, namely the smartphone. The great emancipation that became the great manacle. We were promised flying cars and a 4-hour work week, but instead we were given a rectangular leash that vibrates in our pockets. Oh, it's a miracle, is it not? The sum of human knowledge accessible in a heartbeat. The smartphone was sold as liberation. Connection, they said, but what did it connect us to? To anxiety, total surveillance, constant dopamine addiction, and the unbearable pressure of constant visibility. The machine promised freedom from labor. Instead, it transformed every human being into both prisoner and prison guard. You are no longer a citizen, but you are a content machine to be harvested. The higher revolution. It was precisely against this counterfeiting engine, the fiat system's capacity to steal time, corrupt incentives, and hollow out meaning, that Bitcoin was invented. It arrived as a direct answer to the question, the fiat world refused to ask, what if money could be made honest? For a generation who had watched institutions lie with impunity, Bitcoin was not merely a new asset, it was a lifeline. That said, even a genuine cure can become a new affliction in the hands of a spiritually hungry age. The new maximalism. While today we have Bitcoin, a money that was engineered to quantum leap all of fiat money's inadequacies, the same virtue signaling trap is also a threat to Bitcoiners too. Some have come to view Bitcoin as more than just a tool for financial sovereignty. Bitcoin became, for a significant and vocal contingent, not a means but an end. Instead of being viewed as a foundation on which to build a more honest civilization, it became the destination in itself. Due to their own internal emptiness and meaninglessness, they have made Bitcoin their God and Savior. Humans, when they encounter something true and rare and genuinely liberating, have a tendency to do one of two things: monetize it or worship it. A spiritually empty person can also transform the truth into theater. This too is vanity. Don't get me wrong, Bitcoin is a magnificent tool, the Excalibur for beheading the fiat Leviathan, but a tool worshipped is an idol, and every idol demands the same sacrifice: your capacity for wonder outside of its domain. While most may say they want financial sovereignty, that's fine. But sovereignty is not a number on a ledger. It is a courage to take 100% responsibility for your own life, free from time theft by the counterfeiters, free to create and build without hindrance or interference from state-sponsored Malthusians, and free to say no to any form of tyranny. Unfortunately, the ledger cannot give you that. It can only store value, and a life spent storing value without generating meaning is just a more disciplined version of the fiat rat race. A technology created to liberate individuals from collective delusion can itself become another stage for collective vanity for the virtue signaling crowd. These folks accumulate Bitcoin not as a sovereign individual, but as a status performer. They seek not freedom, but identity. They wrap themselves in Bitcoin maximalism the same way others wrap themselves in political ideology, luxury brands, or social justice slogans. The human ego is indeed infinitely adaptable. Destroy one idol, and it manufactures another. Here is perhaps the most difficult truth of all. No technology can save a civilization suffering from spiritual rot. Not Bitcoin, not AI. A man with no purpose will remain lost, whether he holds inflated fiat currency or Bitcoin, because meaning cannot be downloaded and neither can wisdom be tokenized. This is where the virtue signaling trap has ensnared some Bitcoiners, where they manage to correctly diagnose the corruption of the monetary system but fail to recognize the corruption within themselves. They fled the fiat empire while carrying the empire's values inside their own souls. Once again, the axiom holds that one does not become truly free merely by changing currencies. He becomes free when he is no longer needing applause to know who he is. That's the higher revolution, where you don't merely escape the corrupt fiat monetary system, but you escape the counterfeit self, the one that wants to have without being and seeks the applause of men above all else. Otherwise, Bitcoin itself risks becoming another luxury brand for the spiritually homeless people wandering through the ruins of modernity, having successfully escaped the fiat collapse, but while remaining internally enslaved. This too is vanity. Build the cathedral. So here's the harder truth, Bitcoiner. The one you may not retweet. Your stack is not your soul, and your node is not your salvation. When all is said and done, you will be left with exactly what the virtue signaler is left with: your own naked, unperformable, non-transferable self. If that self is empty, then orange pilling the world is not going to fill it. You will simply become a hollow missionary of a hollow God, and the future, the real future, not the one you meme into existence, will bury your cold wallet under the same rubble that swallows all idols. So, by all means, use the tool. Reclaim your wealth from the counterfeiters, but for the love of whatever still burns in you, do not worship the tool, as this too is vanity. So here's the charge. To the Bitcoiners who found something real and are now in danger of turning it into another performance, build on it. Do not merely hold sound money while living hollow lives. Build with it. Build the thing that outlasts you. Build the cathedral no quarterly report can justify. Build the work that hides its signature in forgotten corners because the craft itself demanded excellence, not applause. The real question is not whether humanity can engineer better money. We already have. The real question is whether the capacity to build still survives beneath the scar tissue of fiat thinking, short-termism, and performative hustle. Whether somewhere beneath the algorithmically managed personalities and dopamine economies, there still exists a builder, a true craftsman immune to the virtue signaling bug, a human being willing to dedicate himself to something bigger than themselves that cannot be reduced to engagement metrics, exit valuations, or social values. I believe there is. Somewhere right now in a workshop, a garage, a studio, or a mind not yet fully colonized by the machine, someone is still working patiently on something true that does not beg for attention, does not optimize for virality, does not scream for validation, but simply strives with everything it has to be worthy. That person is the enemy of the system. That person is free because they have found a source of meaning that no central bank can inflate away. No algorithm can manipulate, no state can counterfeit, and no crowd can grant or revoke. Go be that person. All right, that's the end of that article, and it's rather well done. Kudzai did a good job on this. Especially that last part about building the cathedral. And it does speak to my heart because, well, in my mind, I am building a cathedral. And it's the cathedral series, which I swore I was going to get part 6 of cathedral out on Saturday, but I did not realize that my wife had Friday off. So we went to go do something nice together. Whereas what I should have been doing was what I was thinking I was going to be doing was recording part 6 of Cathedral, but it was more valuable to go on a hike with my wife. And that's what I decided to do instead, because as much as I think the Cathedral project is important and it needs to be worked on continuously for me, it does not take the place of my relationship with my wife. And I think that it kind of makes sense to say that here in the context that we just got from this article. Build the thing that outlasts you. Why? I mean, that's the thing that sucks for me about the Cathedral project. I doubt very, very seriously that I'm ever going to be able to even remotely build anything like that in reality. And if you don't know what Cathedral is, go to the bitcoinandshow.com, bitcoinandshow.com. That's bitcoinandshow.com. Look at the top and you will see the word Cathedral. Click it and you will see all 5 parts that I've done on the Cathedral series. There's a brief write-up as well as a full podcast episode that describes in detail each particular one of the 5 parts of Cathedral that I have online so far. It's a giant silvopasture that takes up 1,000 acres. It's permanent agriculture, and that does not mean permaculture. Permaculture literally means permanent culture. The fact that you need agriculture for permanent culture, then that mistake that people make thinking that permaculture means permanent agriculture, it is a mistake, but agriculture comes for the ride. It's not separate. It's actually part of the whole deal because agriculture is part of culture. Anyway, so it's 1,000-acre project with like thousands of nut trees. Thousands of nut trees, tens of thousands of black locust trees and support trees. It's basically a guide of how to build something that has animals and trees, and everything is basically permanent and designed to become more fertile over the course of 1,000 years. And I'm certainly not, I wouldn't even if I started today, if somebody gave me $1 billion and said, go build it, start right now, I would not be able to see its completion by the time that I died if I started right now. But I feel that it's important enough because it keeps nagging at my brain. I got to get it out. But there's something else about this article. And I think it's best summed up in this one. A man with no purpose will remain lost, whether he holds inflated fiat currency or Bitcoin, because meaning cannot be downloaded and neither can wisdom be tokenized. This is where the virtue signaling trap has ensnared some Bitcoiners, where they managed to correctly diagnose the corruption of the monetary system, but failed to recognize the corruption within themselves. They fled the fiat empire while carrying the empire's values inside their own souls. I've spoken about this on several occasions, and I'm looking at Michael Saylor. I'm looking at David Bailey. And I might very well be looking at Jack Mallers because there's some shit going on with that 21 and Tether and SoftBank. I don't want to get into that right now today. But what I've been basically saying is that we keep trying to inject old world values into Bitcoin. And when that's done, and you can tell that it's successfully done by having these massive pangs of like, oh shit. When that's what you say when you see a successful injection of the old fiat world successfully joining with Bitcoin, you feel a punch in the gut. That's how you know it's a successful union, right? Like Michael Saylor and his buying of bonds and his issuing of preferred perpetuals. You know, watching the old legacy financial system embrace Bitcoin, not in a gentle hug. It's more like a boa constrictor squeezing its prey. Bitcoin's not going to break because of it, by the way. But right now we're at the stage where we're watching the boa constrictor fully wrapped around the Bitcoin, and we're looking at it going, I don't know, man. This looks like it could be lethal for Bitcoin. It's for one, it's not. But we're right here looking at that squeeze. At the tight, it's getting tight, man. It's like we're almost to the tightest part of the squeeze. We'll find out if it breaks. It's not going to break. But right now we're at that point where it's like, I don't know, man. This doesn't look good. This doesn't look good. And that's one of the things that this article really brought about was this emptiness, this spiritual vacuum, and all the rest of the things that Kudzai talked about. It's this absence of anything. And it turns into a vacuum that collects garbage. It's like garbage is the first thing attracted to the absence of spirituality, the absence of hope, the absence of the knowledge of a future. And it just starts sucking in the worst parts of humanity. He's not wrong about a lot of this. So the article itself, if you want to reread it, I suggest you do. Because I fumbled on a couple of these sentences, and my apologies for that. But the URL to the Noster note is in the show notes. Go read it for yourself and let me know what you think. Let's run the numbers. CNBC Futures and Commodities. I don't think this peace deal with Iran is anything but a whole bunch of hot air. And Brent North Sea prices are telling me that I'm probably right. Up 4.1% back to $100.08. That's after Brent and West Texas Intermediate came down fairly severely on Sunday at the market open for futures. But now they've retraced they've retraced right back to where they began on Sunday afternoon. Now, they haven't retraced all the way up to where they were like last weekend, but the market opened on energy and shit kept on falling down and falling down. I think West Texas Intermediate got to like 91 or like $90 or something like that. But now it's starting to recover. And chances are good. That's because, in the middle of this whole peace deal thing, the United States and Israel have attacked Iran, like dropped bombs and missiles on them and sunk some ships. And I don't know, went after a couple of missile sites. But apparently the talks are still ongoing. None of this shit makes sense. I'm sorry. It doesn't. If you're a Washington insider and you're going, well, this is just because you're unsophisticated. It makes complete sense to me. Yeah, I'll bet you that if somebody told you that same story, like 35 years ago and you were a Washington insider then, you would be going, this doesn't make any sense. Maybe it makes sense now because everything is sick and twisted and fake and gay, but back then, even just 35 years ago, I'll bet you would have been going, what the hell are you doing? We're in the middle of supposed peace talks. I don't buy it, right? So Brent North Sea is at $100 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate is still down slightly, 2.5% to the red, $94.14. Natural gas is up 1.5% to $2.94 per thousand. Gasoline, however, getting a break, 4.6% to the downside, $3.29 a gallon. Murban crude is up 3.4% to just under $96. Metals, everything is up except gold. Palladium is up 2 points, but gold is down a half to $4,503. Platinum is up a half. Silver is up, but only slightly. It's $76.32 per ounce, and copper is up 1/4 point. Ag is fully mixed today. Biggest winner is, chocolate, double digits, dude. 10 points to the upside. Holy smokies. Biggest loser today is wheat, 1.25 to the downside. Live cattle is down 1/4, lean hogs down 1/3, and feeder cattle are up 1/4. The S&P is up 0.4%. NASDAQ is up 1.31%. The Dow is down 1/4, and the S&P Mini is up 1.15%. And then there's Bitcoin, which was tagging $78,000 right as I started this show, and is now back down to $76,340. That's because oil is rising, and bond yields are starting to inch back up a little bit after they had severely decreased over the weekend. And all of that is due to what's going on in Iran, because again, nobody knows nothing. This is a $1.53 trillion market cap. We can purchase 17 ounces of our favorite shiny metal rock with our one Bitcoin, of which there are 20,034,598.03 of. Average fees per block are average. There's about 45 blocks carrying 100,000 unconfirmed transactions waiting to clear at high priority rates of 2 sats per VByte. Low priorities will get you in at 0.5. And we're back in zettahash territory on Bitcoin's hash rate. It's a 1 week moving average, but we are at 1.01 zettahashes per second. That's all the security that I need to see for the Bitcoin network. Reminder, go to bitcoinandshow.com. That's bitcoinandshow, all one word, .com. I just want to make sure that people are realizing that I am keeping back up with my website. I'm posting I didn't post Friday's show because Friday was too short. I was kind of discombobulated, and it was just basic news. But for the most part, I am updating that website. So if you want to go see past episodes, see a small breakdown of what happened to that episode, if you don't have time to listen to the whole thing, it's a good resource. Plus, again, if you look at the top, you'll see home, about, and the Circle P, as well as Cathedral. If you want to learn more about the thought experiment that is Cathedral, just click Cathedral and you'll find out all about it. Now, from Pizza, which was Friday's episode of Bitcoin, and I've got Jason High with 250 sats says nothing. Nick Dose with 219 says cheers. And Noster Gang with 101 says happy pizza day. Because, well, it was kind of pizza day the day before. Wait, was it Friday was pizza day? Yeah, Friday was pizza day. It was the 22nd. And that's the weather report. Welcome to part 2 of the news that you can use. Crypto PAC money pours into the Texas primary runoffs as prediction markets favor challengers. This is Turner Wright out of Cointelegraph. 2 Texas congressional candidates supported by millions of dollars in spending from interest groups aligned with the cryptocurrency industry are headed for runoffs this week in races for the U.S. Senate as well as the House of Reps. On Tuesday, Democratic voters in Texas's 18th congressional district will decide between incumbent Al Green and challenger Christian Menifee to run in November's general election. Statewide, voters will choose between Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and incumbent John Cornyn for the Republican primary of the U.S. Senate. Both Tuesday races are runoffs after none of the candidates failed to secure a majority in Texas's March primaries. The crypto industry, though, spending on media by political action committees, has stakes in both races, which could influence policy and the makeup of Congress going into 2027. As of Sunday, Protect Progress, affiliated with the Ripple and Coinbase-backed Fair Shake PAC, spent $5 million to support Menifee over Al Green. The PAC spent $2.8 million on ads opposing Green. Menifee also has the endorsement of the Blockchain Leadership Fund, a committee backed by Anchorage Digital and Chainlink Labs, though it has not reported any expenditures as of Monday. The outcome of the primaries could influence who will ultimately win Texas's 18th district and one of the state's 2 Senate seats in the November general election. Under a Republican majority, lawmakers have passed key pieces of legislation supported by the crypto industry, including the Stablecoin Genius Act. At least one of the ads, funded by Protect Progress to support Menifee, did not mention crypto or blockchain, but rather Green's opposition to U.S. President Donald Trump. Bill King, a former opinion writer for the Houston Chronicle, said in a local Fox 26 segment that aired on Sunday, quote, "I saw 12 television commercials yesterday paid for by the Protect Progress PAC, and that same group of people are the ones that are primarily funding Trump," end quote. The Fellowship PAC, funded by Wall Street firm Cantor Fitzgerald in Anchorage, reported spending $500,000 to support Paxton over Cornyn for the U.S. Senate seat. The expenditure came about 24 hours after Trump endorsed Paxton, saying that John Cornyn had been, quote, very late in backing him as a Republican candidate for president. Kalshi Prediction Markets gave its users 91% and 96% chances on event contracts favoring Menifee over Green and Paxton over Cornyn, respectively. Okay, so they're spending money supposedly to get some more favorable legislation for the cryptocurrency industry. But honestly, nothing of what they do is going to affect the Paxton John Cornyn election. I think I think Paxton's got it. It's just the environment we live in right now. Once Trump decides you're an enemy, he's going to figure out a way to unseat your ass. And he's done it basically in spectacular fashion a couple of times already. And I don't think that John Cornyn is going to survive this time. I mean, he's been a senator like 6 times or something like that. But I think Ken Paxton is going to get in. All right. Let's move over to Harvard, where they have dumped their entire ETH position after only 1 quarter of holding. They also dumped some Bitcoin, but they didn't dump it all. They dumped all of their ETH, which they never should have bought that shit in the first place. But Vince Quill out of Cointelegraph is going to give us the lowdown. Harvard Management Company, the entity that manages Harvard University's endowment fund, sold all of its Ether holdings after just 1 quarter, according to its Q1 2026 United States Securities and Exchange Commission filing. The endowment no longer holds the $87 million in BlackRock iShares Ethereum Trust Exchange Traded Fund shares, which it did hold in the 4th quarter of 2025. Harvard also reduced its exposure to Bitcoin in the 1st quarter of this year, offloading about 2.3 million Bitcoin ETF shares. The endowment fund still holds more than 3 million shares of BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust. It's valued at nearly $117 million. And then they talk about the turbulent year for Ether. But we don't care. Ether is a scam. It's always been a scam. It's always rode on the coattails of Bitcoin. It's a Rube Goldberg machine, and even Harvard can see it. They didn't dump out of crypto. They just dumped out of ETH, and they realigned how much money they had in Bitcoin, but they still kept quite a bit. So even Harvard figured it out. Okay, so Pope Leo. I know it's does the Pope shit in the woods? Well, yeah, if he has to. Pope Leo releases first AI encyclical, calls data a common good, and rejects moral neutrality on technology. Jose Antonio lands for decrypt.co. I think this is important to understand where the Catholic Church is going to fall on the notion of artificial intelligence as we move forward. And this is what the encyclical does. Now, I'm not an expert in Catholicism, but this is Pope Leo's very first encyclical that I know about, and they're kind of a big deal, encyclicals. And I'm not exactly sure what they are other than essentially an essay that summarizes what a whole bunch of high-ups in the Catholic Church think about a certain thing. Be that as it may, Pope Leo published his first encyclical on Monday, a 245-paragraph document dedicated entirely to artificial intelligence that demands tighter oversight of big tech, classifies data as a shared human resource, and argues that technology is never neutral because it absorbs the values, blind spots, and economic incentives of whoever builds it. The document, entitled Magnifica Humanitas, or Magnificent Humanity, was released at the Vatican's Synod Hall on May the 25th. Pope Leo signed it 10 days earlier, May the 15th, the 135th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, the 1891 encyclical by Pope Leo VIII on labor rights that became the foundation of modern Catholic social teaching. Pause. This is why the encyclical is kind of important. And now we've got another Pope Leo doing an encyclical on AI. So if the Rerum Novarum encyclical of 1891 became the foundation of Catholic social teaching, that's important. The encyclical is not to be ignored, and this one is on AI. And Pope Leo has consistently framed AI as a defining moral challenge of his papacy and compared the coming social upheaval to that of the Industrial Revolution. The encyclical covers a lot of ground: AI and warfare, dehumanization, technocracy, data colonialism, child safety online, mass unemployment, disinformation, autonomous weapons, and even transhumanism. But the argument tying it together is simple. Every algorithm reflects the priorities of the people who designed, funded, and deployed it. Building systems that pretend otherwise doesn't eliminate that bias, it just hides it. Catholic social teaching has long held that the Earth's natural resources are intended for all of humanity, not private owners. Leo extends that principle directly to the digital economy. Algorithms, platform, and data, the encyclical argues, must be governed as common goods, not locked behind commercial walls by just a few companies. Quote, data is the product of many contributors and should not be treated as something to be sold off or entrusted to a select few, the Pope writes. The text also applies subsidiarity, the principle that decisions should be made at the most local level possible. I agree. To tech platforms specifically, the encyclical doesn't just call for top-down regulation, advocating instead for transparent algorithms, independent community audits, and real legal power for people to challenge automated systems that affect their credit scores, job applications, or criminal risk assessments. Without that distributed oversight, Leo argues, governance of AI becomes a form of digital authoritarianism that silences the populations it claims to serve. Well, that's a good point. The encyclical also takes aim at transhumanism, the idea that human limitation and vulnerability are flaws to be engineered away. Leo's counter is that finitude is not a bug. It's what makes empathy, moral judgment, and genuine care for other people possible. Systems built to optimize it out don't produce a better human. They produce something that evaluates and excludes the vulnerable more efficiently. The Pope is careful not to anthropomorphize the technology. AI systems, the encyclical states, quote, do not possess a body, do not feel joy or pain, he writes. The encyclical notes that AI systems lack the lived experience that produces real understanding. They can simulate empathy and produce convincing language, but they don't comprehend what they output. That distinction matters in a practical sense. When an algorithm makes hiring decisions, sets credit terms, or assigns a risk score in a courtroom, its apparent objectivity obscures the choices baked in by its designers. The encyclical warns specifically against delegating sensitive decisions to automated systems that, quote, do not know compassion, mercy, forgiveness, and against treating the results as neutral just because a machine produced it. The person sharing the stage with Leo on Monday drew as much attention as the document itself. Christopher Olah, the co-founder of Anthropic and head of its interpretability research team, spoke at the Synod Hall presentation alongside two Vatican cardinals and a pair of theologians. This is just getting weird. That's me saying this. I'm pausing to say this is starting to get weird. This is the kind of shit that a novel can be written about. All right. So as Decrypt reported, when Leo was elected, the Pope framed AI as the central moral question of his papacy from his very first address to the cardinals. Monday's encyclical is the formal doctrinal version of that commitment. Olah used the occasion to say openly what most AI executives avoid, that every major lab operates inside a set of incentives and constraints that can sometimes conflict with doing the right thing, and that outside scrutiny from governments, religious institutions, and civil society isn't optional. He also flagged AI-driven labor displacement as a near-term risk that, if it materializes at scale, would create a moral imperative of historic proportions. Leo had already written the harder version of the argument, quote, a more moral AI is not enough, the encyclical states, if the morality behind it is set exclusively by whoever controls the data and the compute. Leo made the same case directly to Silicon Valley executives at the Vatican in November of 2025. The Vatican also approved a new internal AI commission on May the 16th, drawing from 7 departments that coordinate AI governance work across the Holy See going forward. Okay. Yeah, that's the end of the article. There's a lot to say about this, I suppose, but it should probably be said in your own mind. So I'm just going to say this. The fact that the co-founder of Anthropic flew to Rome and then went inside Vatican City and then went to this encyclical and stood right next to the Pope. And he's talking to a shit ton of cardinals, which basically this is the hierarchy of the Catholic Church worldwide. And Anthropic's co-founder is standing shoulder to shoulder with Pope Leo. I don't know. I honestly don't know what to think about what he said, because he was saying, your input as the church, it's not in our labs. And I don't think he was saying that to basically be defensive. I think that I don't know. It may be possible that there are some actual humans inside Anthropic that still retain some of their actual humanity. Let's go back to the article I read from Kudzai. What was he talking about? The fact that Ola was standing shoulder to shoulder with Pope Leo at the Vatican during the presentation of the encyclical, because there was a full reading of it at one point or another that day, and saying that inside laboratories of AI, they don't listen to governments, they don't listen to the Pope, they don't listen to religious stuff, they don't really listen to what anybody wants, they only do what is going to, increase the incentives among their own. And like I said, my reading of it is that he was not saying that as too bad, go try to cry harder if it makes you feel better. I think he was saying, no, this is an actual fact and it's problematic. Otherwise, why would he have even gone? I mean, I guess if he didn't, somebody else that represented the AI industry would have. And God forbid, I sure as shit wouldn't want to see Sam Altman standing up there with Pope Leo. And Pope Leo is not my favorite pope. I feel a little bit better about him now, reading some of this stuff about this encyclical, but he's still a far cry away from Pope John Paul, my favorite pope ever. And I'm not a Catholic. I mean, it's like I wasn't raised in the Catholic Church. So, I don't have really a dog in that hunt. But there was something about Pope John Paul. That dude was awesome. He got shot. They tried to assassinate him, and he physically took a bullet, at least one bullet. And it wasn't a graze. He actually they had to dig that son of a bitch out of his body. Totally survived. I think he was like in his 80s when that happened. Totally survived. Or at least in his 70s. I don't know, man. This Pope, I'm not all that excited about, but they're talking about AI. They're talking about morality. Talking about how humanity is going to deal with this advent of technology as we move forward. And as we saw in 1891, the encyclical became the foundation of what the Catholic Church was teaching as from a societal basis. Labor rights and that kind of thing. If this gets the same traction and the Catholic Church embraces the encyclical and turns it into a teaching mechanism for the well over 1 billion Catholics that are in the world, then what does that look like? And that's why the encyclical is so important, because it's not like, oh, they're going to affect 50 million people. Whoop-de-doo. No. This is the entirety of the Catholic Church. The encyclicals are important to the foundation of what the Catholic Church does going forward. And AI, this encyclical was all about technology and AI and transhumanism and a lot of the stuff that's scaring the piss out of most people right now anyway. So it's rather timely Is it marketing, or is it just the fact that it needed to be said? I don't know. But I'm not going to pontificate on it any further. See what I did there? Kash Patel linked apparel store goes dark after pushing a crypto stealing malware. Okay, I'll just give you the skinny. Kash Patel, yes, that Kash Patel, director of the FBI, has an apparel store online. And somebody pushed a crypto stealing malware into the shop. So when you were buying whatever merch Kash Patel is selling, and I don't really give a shit, your crypto could be absconded with because his website takes crypto. Well, that website has gone dark. So I guess they're trying to figure out a way to fix whatever it is they pushed. Is it the crypto stealing malware that I'm interested in? No. It's that Kash Patel has a website that sells merch. What? WTF? I've never heard of this before. It's rather interesting, but that's all the time I've got for you today. So I'm going to let you go, and I will see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.